So when when I get an information publisher that comes to me and wants me to invest in their business, and we are able to pick up that business, and they come in for their first 2 days, right? We bring everybody in for 2 full days. If we make an investment in the company, they come in for 2 days, and I sit in a room with them and we walk through the business. The first thing we do is draw 4 big blocks on the wall, because almost everybody in this space have an incomplete business. In other words, they have them, usually I always say they have the middle, right? They've built an information product. They're figure out a way to sell it by a webinar with a partner or affiliates or what have you. And they made some money, and they believe that that's the whole business. And that's the unfortunate part. And it's where I get to, I hate to say take advantage of them, but I do kind of take advantage of them, because I'll buy into that business for very little money because it's not very valuable. And then by adding the other pieces of the puzzle, I make the company very, very valuable. And when it becomes very valuable, we usually sell them on the other side, and everybody makes a whole bunch of money, including me. And that's sort of my business model now. So I invented this framework called Gold, Maps, Shovels, and Guides. It's an easier way for people to understand why they need all these parts in their business. But if you generally speaking, if you check all 4 pillars of this, you'll at least triple your profits in your business. And I think triple is a pretty low, actually it's pretty low, to be frank with you. A lot of times we'll 10x a business by just making sure these other boxes are checked. So if you don't know me, I'm co-founder of Digital Marketer, Warren Mastermind, company called Native Commerce. It's an Inc. 500 company, and the founder of Olympus Peak Media. So we're partners with the Agora companies. That's kind of who cares, right? I've sold about $500 million worth of product online. That's probably the more important part. Most of it being, I don't know if most of it, but a large percentage of it being information publishing. So like I said, what I see every day are those, people have one part, but there are really 4 parts to a good information business. So they're acquisition products, which I'm kind of the king of that. That's what I'm really good at. There are information products and training. There are tools and services, and there's mentorship and consulting, right? If you look at anybody's business in this space that's doing $20 million or more a year, they typically have all 4 boxes checked. If you look at the people that are doing under $1 million or $1 million or $2 million, they typically have 1 of these boxes checked, sometimes 2, but rarely even 2, right? So my job when I bring these companies in is to make sure they have all the boxes checked. So let's let me tell you about it with a story. So imagine that a friend of yours came to you today and said, "Hey, I've heard that there's gold. They're mining for gold, and they're finding gold right now in South Florida," right? Because I'm in South Florida, right? And you said, "Man, I want that gold. I'd like to have some gold." You'd have to have a few things before you went out and searched for this gold. You'd have to really believe there was gold there. And it'd have to be a gold, the kind of gold that you wanted, right? It might not, that maybe there's lead or tin or something you don't want. It's got to be the thing you want, right? 2, you would need a map to get to where the biggest hoard of the gold was. 3, when you got there, you would want to have a shovel, a bucket, or ideally a bulldozer to help you take the gold out of the ground. And if you were really smart and you wanted to cut out all the mistakes and avoid mistakes, you would hire a guide to go with you when you went on this mining expedition. So, gold mining 101 is a goal you really want. How do I go about locating it? Can I quickly and easily dig it up? And is someone else coming along to make sure that I don't make a mistake? So first, let's talk about the gold. So this is the challenge that I find with most offers. Everybody teaches copywriting. A lot of people teach copywriting, and they do a really good job of it, right? There's a lot of good courses on copywriting in the market. You can learn from Onik. You can learn from guys like John Carlton. You learn from by reading books by John Caples that were printed years ago. You can learn from Dan Kennedy. A lot of people do a good job at teaching copywriting, and everybody really wants to master that art, right? But here's the big deal. It doesn't matter if you haven't truly gotten to what the individual you're talking to wants, right? And I see it over and over and over again that entrepreneurs decide what they want to sell to their market because it's what they want to sell. It's not necessarily what the market wants, right? So really understanding at a psychological level why people want a thing is totally different. So some good examples of this are, the Heinz company, when it first started, the Mr. Heinz, who started Heinz company, felt that everybody in the world wanted vinegar. That's what they wanted. They wanted vinegar. And he went out door to door selling vinegar. And one of his customers was buying vinegar from him, was pouring into a concoction with tomatoes and making like a saucy tomato stuff that people like putting on their food called ketchup. And Heinz ended up making ketchup himself and became a hugely successful entrepreneur. But it wasn't what he thought he was going to sell. So you may be in a business right now where you're selling a thing and you don't, I'm trying to get this out of my way. There we go. Yeah, you may be in a business right now where you're trying to sell a thing that people don't really want, but they want some part of what you're selling, right? The next is the Ivory Company. They were started by two twin brothers, and they decided to go door to door selling candles back in the 1800s. But people didn't want candles; they wanted soap. Procter and Gamble. So Procter and Gamble became Procter and Gamble are a brother and a brother-in-law that started that company. They went out selling candles. Turns out everybody wanted soap. When they started selling soap, everything turned around. They became wildly successful. The Hershey's company started out selling caramels and eventually understood that people really wanted chocolate. So my point is, take a look at what you're selling and make sure, number one, that the market really wants your gold, because if you're coming to me with the greatest sales letter in the world to sell me tampons, I'm not a buyer. You're in the wrong market, right? I don't want that. I might want something else. So you got to find out exactly what somebody wants, and you got to make sure you're fishing in that pond. So what's their desired end result? So how do you determine that? So what people don't understand is at the end of the day, people buy products to get a result. They don't buy products for the sake of the product, right? They don't buy ketchup because they want ketchup. They buy ketchup because it makes stuff taste better. They don't buy soap because they want soap. They want to buy soap because they don't want to smell bad. They want to smell good. They want to be clean, in the end, they buy chocolate because it makes them feel better, right? So what's the desired end result of the customer? So that's what you should be concentrating on. When you're about to sit down and write your offer, write your copy, think about peeling the onion back, right? What's in it for me? What's that one thing that you can get across very, very quickly that's a benefit in the life of the person they're going to get from buying your product? They don't care about the product itself. They don't care about you. They care what the desired end result is going to be once they buy the product. What are they going to get it, or what's in it for me?